moved into this house 5 years ago. Today, I found out it had a secret basement. I'd finally got round to doing the renovations. Saving up for a mortgage deposit damn near emptied my bank. The next step was finally fixing the place up. It took me a while. Materials and labor cost a fair bit, after all. That's also why I decided to try and do as much as I could myself even though I know nothing about DIY. Mom and Dad helped me find the house and chipped in a bit on the down payment. Maybe if I'd told them about my renovation plans instead of trying to make it a surprise they'd have stopped me. A family friend, Hank, hooked me up. He wasn't a realtor but he knew people and managed to convince the seller to hold off before it hit the market and got snapped up by some rich cubicle monkey from the city looking for a summer home. I didn't meet the previous owner. Didn't think to ask. I thought I'd struck gold when I took the keys, but now I'm starting to connect the dots. I never saw who used to own the place. Mom and Dad handled all the paperwork, so I just assumed that Hank had owned the place. I spent the afternoon renovating, and now I could happily let the bank keep the house and mortgage as long as they let me leave town. This was the first house I've owned, and the second I've ever called home, but I don't feel safe in either. I've lived in Alameda all my life and decided long ago I'd never move away. All that's changed. After today I'd take living literally anywhere else, even Pyongyang or Kabul. I didn't even mean to find the door to the basement. While I was carrying my dad's sledgehammer up the stairs, I slipped and dropped the damn thing. It thudded back down the staircase and embedded itself in the wall at the bottom. The hole left when I pulled it out exposed the wall cavity within. I couldn't ignore the handrail, or the fact the wall cavity was wide enough to walk down. My curiosity got the best of me, so that's what I did, and I found the door to the basement at the end of the secret corridor. My honest first thoughts? Annoyed, but also sort of hopeful. This meant the house had more space than on the plans. If I knocked out this wall, the living room would be much bigger, adding thousands to the property value. If it had an entire basement then, well, that could potentially be a whole extra floor. I hadn't been planning to flip the house. I wanted to live in it, but the chance to add an additional floor would add so much to the listed value I might not be able to resist. The door looked like the rest of the doors in the house, albeit dusty and behind on several paint jobs. When I picked up on this fact, I also realized the back wall of the wall cavity was the same blue and white striped wallpaper I'd found hidden underneath the stucco panels I'd removed from the living room. This meant the new wall had been installed long after the house was built. I was only down there for 5 minutes. But in those 5 minutes every positive thought I've had about the house turned to dust, and I felt the need to burn the house down immediately. On my descent down the basement steps I walked calmly, but coming back up them I was sprinting and screaming. The smell hit as soon as I opened the door. Dank, musty, a hint of sweetness to it that suggested mold or rot. It didn't perturb me. I just figured nobody had been down there in years. Maybe a raccoon got in and died. I wish that could have been the case. Turns out it was far worse. The last not terrified emotion I had today was the mild relief when my prying fingers found a switch on the cold wall in the dark. As soon as the basement was flooded with light from the grimy bulb I yelled. Not in fear at first, just in surprise. I didn't expect the room to be furnished. I don't know what I'd expected in the 200 square feet secret floor of my home, but it wasn't a rickety table with a small electric grill and chipped dinner plate. It wasn't a cooler in one corner with a dark red liquid overflowing and a trickle down one side. It definitely wasn't a small TV displaying a static lace CRT rendition of the local news. When I saw the beat up TV, my gaze drifted to the wall behind it. I made another noise then, a kind of half yelp, half moan. This time it was out of fear, but not the full-on heart palpitation causing horror I'd feel by the time I'd reached the top of the stairs again. There were several hatches on the basement ceiling, complete with ladders that presumably lead to other wall cavities around my home. That's how whoever lived down here got around the house. Then I saw the photos. There were dozens of them pinned all over the walls. Polaroids, all of them half blurred and bordered by the black of the wall or ceiling around the holes, each a peep shot through one of the many voyeur ports hidden in my house. Every picture was of me. Sleeping, eating, showering, pooping, even pictures of me and Allison doing it during our brief relationship. I started yelling when I noticed just how far back in my timeline these pictures went. The ones on the wall behind the bed were from when I moved in 5 years ago. Then I turned around to look at the ones directly behind me, and saw straight away that even though they were through peepholes, they weren't taken in my house. They were taken in my parents' house, the one I grew up in. The most recent photo I saw was of me moving tools into the living room. The oldest was of me when I was about 5. When I saw that one, of me sitting by the Christmas tree opening the Nintendo 64, a photo I'd seen so many times but from the angle of Mom's camera on the couch, I started screaming for real. My high-pitched shrieks coincided with the moment the bed started squeaking. I hadn't paid much attention to the bed after turning on the light. The Polaroid collage on the wall of my entire life took up most of my focus. I did notice the bed when the mattress creaked though. Something was moving underneath the gray, stained, moth-eaten blankets. My screams doubled in volume when the thing in the writhing folds sat up. By the time it turned toward me and spoke, I could feel the warmth of piss rivering down my inner left thigh. "What are you doing in my room, little brother?" I've never run so fast in my life. I didn't catch too good of a look at it. My fight or flight response kicked in pretty much the moment I heard the first raspy, crackling syllable. The hunched, rakish figure I managed to glimpse before hurtling myself back up the stairs was waxy, yellowish, and all bones with little muscle. The little hair he had on his lumpy scalp was thin, patchy, the kind of hair usually seen on those undergoing early chemotherapy or nuclear fallout exposure. The smell got worse when it spoke, wafting out its rotting throat from between chipped, blackened teeth. The eyes? From my short look into them, I remember small, shriveled things, puckered reddish orbs harboring wall-angled pinpoint pupils. None of that is why I physically can't bring myself to think too much about the thing living in its own filth under my house all these years, though. It's not even the photos, although speculating about those too long to start an onset of panic attack spiraling. The reason I got in my car this morning and haven't stopped driving until I pulled over 13 hours later to write this, is that something in that yellow, waxen, pustular face was harrowingly familiar. I tried calling Mom, Dad, and Hank dozens of times on the road. None of the three picked up, but that was my fault. I shouldn't have left those ranting half-crazed voicemails after the first calls weren't answered. They're probably making arrangements right now, covering all this up again. I've got so many questions. Problem is, if I want to get answers I'll have to head back into town. Back to where that man, no, that thing that was living in my basement is. I don't know if I can bring myself to go back there, but I have to know. Why did it call me little brother?